A story told very quickly in a very brief way is very, very hard to change. Okay. I was in Afghanistan and my entire company got blown up. There's not enough detail there. All that stuff is it's still in there. I understand that the pen feels like it weighs 900 pounds, fact, or can. And let's get clear about this. That's nothing compared to bumping up into that stuff for 2, 3, 4 decades. That's the real scary shit.
Welcome, folks. Another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast coming to your ear holes. I've got Mark England here, who's a interesting guest, as always. And thanks to Jared, my buddy from the Strong Coach, for setting this up. And Mark, his background's pretty interesting. Mark is the co-founder and head coach of Enlifted. He's been researching, presenting, and coaching on the power of words and stories for the past 16 years. Mark holds a master's degree in education and was an elementary school PE teacher before getting into personal development. And what was cool about this is when Jared was linking us up by email, as soon as he said, "Oh yeah, I was a teacher, I got my master's in education," I was like, "Oh my God, that's like my background, man. I was a teacher, taught high school, did a little bit of elementary school, got my master's, and then one thing led to another, and I'm no longer in the traditional education sphere, but I'm clearly still a teacher at heart and teach pretty much every day, just in a different domain. And obviously, you've got a passion for teaching, and you're able to convey a really cool message. And Mark, I just want to welcome you to the podcast, and thanks for spending some time and chatting about your expertise. So, what brings you to the podcast? And let's start with a little bit of your backstory.
Happy to. Thanks for having me on, Dave, and thanks for listening, everybody. Yeah, we'll start with wrestling. Considering your audience, the whole veteran combat thing. While I'm a civilian, I do appreciate combatives. So I wrestled in high school, got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in college in 1996. Thai boxing was right around the corner. And it was the first thing that ever really held my attention. It was the first thing I ever fell in love with. A couple of girls I fell in love with on site, but this is the first thing. Wrestling was cool. I pin you, you pin me. It sounds a little strange. The first time I ever got choked, though, it was like, I have got to learn this.
What? And you really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, first time. Don't let that happen again.
Well, I didn't know what was going on. It was this mixture of what in the hell is happening to me. And I immediately understood the utility of it. Mm. And I went on a bender. For 6 years, I trained hard, a lot of times harder than I should have, which we'll get to. Had a handful of amateur MMA fights. I won a couple of state kickboxing titles. And my friends were... I was hanging out with was fighters, and people were racking up their fights and going pro, or opening schools, or getting black belts, and I was like, I'm doing it too. And what I chose to do is move to Thailand. The idea was to go over there for a year, practice up my Thai boxing skills, come back and go pro. Which sounds cooler than it would have been. It would have been, a couple $100 for a hard night's work. And yeah, I did not go over there for a year. I ended up living in Thailand for 10 years, which still sounds strange to say.
Wow.
Here's what happened. The most epic fail of my life up until that point was me moving over. I had 3 going away parties, dude. It was a big deal. I'd only had my passport for 2 years.
Wow.
And I moved to Thailand in 2002.
And how old were you?
I was 26.
Okay.
And 6 months in to my first year there, I was having my second knee surgery.
Oh, wow.
And whoops. The doctor told me, I remember clear as like it was yesterday, like it was this morning. He said, your career as a fighter is over. You could become a very good swimmer. Right?
That's hilarious, Doc. Thanks.
Exactly right. 26 years old, full of piss and vinegar. And I'm picturing doing laps next to grandma at the pool.
Yeah.
That's not what I had in mind.
Just a nice calm breaststroke as you.
Oh yeah, backstroke when you get tired, and you might have a cap on.
Yeah,
and
cap is important.
And yeah, it's just you got a lifeguard there, even though it's 5 feet deep, just to make sure. And darkness descended, my man. I used this experience of going after something in a very big way for the first time in my life as the final piece of damning evidence in a case that I was secretly making against myself, that I was somehow not good enough, that there was something wrong with me, and I was doomed to fail. Didn't know why or how. I was just doomed to fail. Guess what, everybody? There's a name for this. It's called a telephobia, the fear of not being good enough. And a lot of what people are struggling with, there's flavors of it, of course. Boils down to that, a mixture of that and the victim mentality. Sprinkle in a little imposter syndrome, and you got quite the pickle. And so, I didn't laugh for a year, which is a weird experience. I didn't laugh for an entire year.
No just
no.
shut her down.
Because I entrenched a victim mentality so deeply and then lit it on fire that it sucked the joy out of me. It sucked the joy and the ability to just be an even decent person out of my face, man. You could see it. And shout out to Heather Rains. This is my 344th podcast that I've been on, talking about this one thing. I'm a one-trick pony. Mike Bledsoe called me a one-trick pony once upon a time, and I loved it. And I still talk about it because I only do one thing. It's talk about how our words influence us for better and for worse. And Mike Bledsoe is a part of this story too, forever.
Love Mike, great guy.
Yeah, dude. He's got a great laugh, man. Talk about laughing. The Bledsoe cackle. You can hear that shit a mile away.
It's unique, yeah.
It's very unique. And so after not laughing for an entire year, and shout out to Heather Rains, a girl. So lucky me, I pulled the hottest girl in school in university, and inside and out, that girl was just a 10 across the board, and she moved over there with me, and finally she just couldn't take it anymore. She left, went back. And then over a period of time, of course, because I turned into a different person. Okay. I wasn't fun anymore. And I looked down that path after a year of not laughing. And I was like, dude, are you going to be the dork complaining about this thing when you're 55? It would have been a mediocre fight career at best, by the way. And I saw that version of me, Dave, and I was like, dude, if you do that, because you could, if you do that, then you really are a loser. And I said, I'll take anything but that. And right around that same time, so my first 5 years in Thailand, I was a PE teacher, elementary school PE teacher at an international school. The second half, I was a counselor at a cleansing resort, a fasting resort.
Okay.
And called the Spa down on an island in the Gulf of Thailand. And so I got introduced to that place when I was still teaching in Bangkok, and I went down there on advice from my principal. He came back and he was like, hey, I just did one of these weird cleanses, and I think it's cool and you'd enjoy it. I was like, huh? What? And I looked it up, and I was like, you know what? I'll do anything. I'll give anything a try, because I am a miserable bastard right now. And so I went down there and I paid them to not eat. It's a great business model. I give them money and they give me a coconut and a yoga mat, and I just get to sit there and stare at the clock. Right?
Great business model.
It's a great business model. There's a little more to it than that. Very low overhead. There's a little more to it than that, of course, and really not that much. And I felt better, and I went back. And I went back again, and my third time down there is when I saw the story game, the language game for the first time. And I went to an emotional detoxification workshop, and in 2003. And the guy, you know what he talked about, everybody? He talked about words and stories and identity. And then he asked, is anybody stuck on a story? And this woman shot her hand up. And she told the story. Okay, yes. Stinger breakup, dude. Stinger breakup. So here's a short story. Her and her friends, they're in college, get a house down at the beach. Her boyfriend and his friends get the house next door, add alcohol, press play. And so he hooks up with
I get an idea
one of
of what's
her best. Yeah, oh yeah.
Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought?
Who could have ever imagined that drama
20-something-year-old
would ensue?
Yeah.
Booze, girls, bikinis.
Hot weather.
Yeah, that's happened more than once, by the way. Yeah,
Probably.
Yeah. None of your audience would be able to relate to something like that. Either none, zero. Yeah, just speaking to the wrong crowd, Mark. And so he hooks up with her best friend in front of everybody one night, and then dumps her in front of everybody the next night. Brutal. This is a left-right combo to the beak. And and that was 4 years ago. And that story, it had taken up so much mental real estate in her head. She thought about it every single day, multiple times a day. That she wasn't able to get into another relationship, and it was really, look at the words, weighing her down. And he had her tell the story 3 times. This guy knew what he was doing. He had her tell the story once, didn't touch anything, just let her have it. At the end and during, she's crying and angry. Second time through, he started to adjust some of the words. And the story started to loosen up. And now she's sad, no tears. Third time through, this guy stopped her at the sentence that was holding the whole thing together. The Lord of the Rings sentence. The Lord of the Rings spell. Spell? What are you talking about spells? Yes, spell. By definition. The definition of a spell, everybody, Webster's, not mine, is a word or combination of words of great influence. That's it. And it goes both ways. They can be expansive in nature. They can be constrictive in nature. So I don't have anyone to turn to. Is a combination of words that if someone believes that will greatly influence them in a constrictive way. Or I've made a lot of progress is also a combination of words that if someone believes them will expand things. It'll brighten the imagination, enlighten the emotions and feelings, help us breathe better, help us focus on what's important. They're both spells by definition. They're just different kinds of spells. Okay? And this spell, though, the sentence that held her victim villain mental imagery in place, if it's okay with you, in about 5 minutes, I'll share the definition of the victim mentality. I'll do it twice. First time slow, and invite everybody to write it down, because once people write down most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality. Okay, and once pen hits paper, you get even more for your time listening to the show. And there was one sentence that forced her to create the victim-villain dynamic regardless of how over it she was. And that sentence was this. And once he got there to this sentence, he had her repeat it 3 times so everybody's staring at the same sentence, same configuration of words, same spell. Here it is. He did that to me. He did that to me. And it held the whole thing in place. And he had her repeat it, like I said. So we're all looking at the same words. And then he said, that last word, take it out and put in himself. And it was such a radical departure from this story that she'd been relentlessly telling herself for 4 years. She said it clunky and with uptalk. Uptalk, when a sentence goes up at the end, it's a question,
Right.
regardless of the punctuation. He did that to himself, and it went up like, right? And then you see it catch, and the breath unlocked. He did do that to himself. And then she started talking about how he lost friends and his girlfriend broke up with him, and just all this, like, it was worse for him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then she walked herself out of the story. This is and she goes, it was never going to work out anyway. That guy was actually really weird.
Guy's a piece of shit anyway. Yeah. That's really fascinating stuff, man. It's funny. I think 2 episodes ago, I just published with Chase Tollison, was literally talking about
My
spells.
man.
So Chase. Yep. Okay, cool. So like that, it's funny that we have 2 different guests talking about spells and spelling and how a story can really hold on to you. And what you're saying here reminds me of just something I've kind of started to appreciate a little bit more, that the experiences you have don't happen to you, they happen for you.
Sure.
And that requires that little shift of how you're saying the story over in your head.
Yeah.
And especially in our community, right? And I'm totally guilty of it as well. And it was only until I did a really interesting 3-weekend veteran getaway where we just worked with the psychologist, and we started telling our story, and we started literally walking, and they started changing the words that were coming out of our mouths, and to unlock that guilt that I was holding on to and just not feeling like I was able to do enough, which was my story. Like, I just left, and like, I didn't save enough people, I didn't do what I was there to do, was just holding me down so much, until I was able to say, like, well, this isn't, I could not have possibly done. And then, this happened for me, because now I'm able to do more because I have a greater context, and they were appreciative over it. And so it seems silly that you can just change a few words and have such a monumental effect. But a lot of us in the community have that inability to voice what we need to get off our chest, and in a controlled environment have that story change. So I'm curious to know, how did you get personally to the point where you had this revelation, like, I don't want to be a miserable piece of shit anymore? Was there somebody in your life that's like, dude, like, your girlfriend left you, that's obviously a kick in the nuts, but after that, it seemed like you probably just kept on living as is, because that reinforced, yeah, I am a piece of shit, of course, so of course she's going to leave me. What did you have to hit? Did you have to hit rock bottom? Was there a moment where you just kind of woke up one morning and you're like, okay, I got to change?
2 things. And shout out to Chase Tiles. I'm going to brag on that motherfucker a little bit. He's a personal friend.
Okay, cool.
He's one of the co-hosts for the Getting Lifted podcast, which is our podcast.
Sweet.
He's one of our level 3 coaches, and he's come out to our family's lake house a number of times. That guy is an ace coach and a good dude, man. Chase Towson is as advertised. We used to own a gym, and like, he's funny too. First, recognizing there was a problem. I got a problem. I haven't laughed in a year. Hotness just left, and I don't care. I didn't care. That made it worse. So because I was cold, man. My heart went cold. It's fuck it. I'll say it. The fight game was more important to me than she was.
Yeah.
And
that was your identity, right? Like, that's who
exactly
you were, the fighter.
Right.
So how could you possibly be the good boyfriend and the Dude, loving boyfriend?
1,000%.
This me is shattered. I'm finished, right?
Dude,
right?
1,000%. That's one of the reasons I stayed over there for 10 years, because I wasn't going back to Virginia and not be that guy. I was like, I'll be a stranger in a strange land, instead of going back over there and all my friends are fighters and not being able to be that way with them and be that person with them. And the real insecure parts of my identity loved people being afraid of me, since I'm being honest, And so I was like, I'm going to stay over here and see what happens. And I knew that my heart was now closed so I get my knee operated on, and I'm walking around with a peg leg, and right around that same time, she gets into salsa dancing. And I'm definitely not dancing, because I can barely walk. And then we get into we would go to this place called La Rueda, known it's Spanish for the wheel, and it was this Cuban salsa. It's a really cool scene. Okay, I couldn't participate. What I did do, I'd booze at the bar. I'd sit there at the bar, and you know what? This is going to be a total shock. You know what Cuban dudes love? Hot ass blonde girls. And so I'd sit there. It's unbelievable. It's just it's so complicated. I understand. And so I'd sit at the bar and drink, and just one night I'm about 7 in, no end in sight, and I'm watching these dudes spin her around on the dance floor. And again, I got a gangster lean, and I was like, I don't care. I don't care that they're trying to take her out of this bar under my nose, even though we're in the community. And that's when I was like, oh, you really are in it, dude. And so I recognized I had a problem. And then the second was when I saw something to do about it, was when he did that to me, because I had that story too. Because when she flipped that thing, and I was like right there, because he shouldn't have been kicking that hard. We were just warming up.
Oh shit, yeah.
Okay. And so I had that. Look at the words. He did that to me. You know what happens in someone's mental imagery when they say that? Because 2 + 2 = 4. He's in the picture. I'm in the picture. He's doing something to me repeatedly. Doesn't matter if it happened 4 days ago or 4 years ago or 44 years ago. The imagination don't care. Yeah. Right. And so it enacts and maintains a stress response. And so, once I learned that there was something that I could do with my story, also known as my mindset. So we're in the mindset game. Okay. We certify coaches. That's our main business. That's the spinal column of our business. It's our main revenue stream. I'm the head coach. I deliver every single training, and we certify coaches first and foremost in how to dismantle the victim mentality. That definition's coming up soon. And we might as well be known as we're known as the language people. Thanks. It's great to be known for something. We might as well be known as the language and the breathing people. And gun to head, it's about the breath. See, here it is in a nutshell, everybody. Most people's language is working against them, unbeknownst to them, and it's an education issue. I came up in the public school system. I have a master's degree in education. Neither side of that fence did I have any courses, classes, or conversations about how to use my language, my words, to stay focused on what's important to me, keep the drama low, and build myself up in my imagination. It's all spelling, grammar, and definitions. No, there's a whole other game to play. And here's part of putting the puzzle pieces together of that game is having a definition of mindset. We have a definition of mindset. Most of the time when mindset's talked about, it's done in this big picture way, this big philosophical thing that's hard to implement. And then there's that confident person looking over there. That looks fun. I'm over here. Whoops, would have been nice. No, you know what mindset is, everybody? Take it or leave it. This is the enlifted definition, and it's extremely complicated. Good luck understanding this. Our mindset is the story we tell ourselves. It's the story we tell ourselves to ourselves. It's the story we tell ourselves about ourselves and what we can do and what we can't do and what we do deserve to have and what we don't deserve to have. And that story, here's more rocket science, is made up of words. It's made up of words, and we participate in our mindset all throughout the day, every day. And most people fall into the trap, and I understand why, of thinking that the answer to my problems, which are so big and complicated, the answer has to be equally as big and complicated.
Right.
That's not the case. It's actually the exact opposite 99% of the time. Get a pen and a piece of paper, and I can show you what I'm talking about. So here's the definition of the victim mentality. I'll do it twice. Oh, here's some good numbers, everybody. 30, 50, 80. We remember 30% of what we hear, 50% of what we write, 80% of what we turn around and share or teach. Same thing. So if you got a pen and a piece of paper, I invite you to write this down, because most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality. They just listen to people talk about victim mindset or playing the victim. Sometimes they'll use the victim mentality. No, there's a definition, and it's important to hear. And if you put pen to paper, you're now even in a more exclusive club. Here it is twice. First time slow. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. Again, a little faster with some context. Oh, and this, by the way, I'm calling it right now, Dave, and everybody on the audience. This learning about the victim mentality and the language patterns that it has to have is one of the missing pieces in the mindset game. In my personal and professional opinion, it's somewhere between hard and impossible to have a contextualized, practical, as in I can practice doing things differently, practical conversation about mindset without the definition of the victim mentality, and then a contextualized conversation about what words to use less of and why to dismantle that motherfucker.
Well, that's part of that's part of like the Socratic method of having a debate, right? You need to define the terms. If you can't define the terms, then you can't really have a conversation, because you don't know that you're on the same page.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Very, yeah, exactly. A definition of mindset, definition of the victim mentality, classification of language patterns, quite helpful. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends, it's a tendency, folks, sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. A person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. That second sentence is right between the eyes, right where it belongs. The victim mentality depends, underline that word, everybody, as in it has to have a habitual thought process and attributions. Habitual accurately implies duration and addiction. Oh yeah, we get addicted to it. And a thought process. What's a thought process? That's certain words used consecutively. Okay, so you have the words that you use repeatedly over time. That's your thought processes. And then attributions. What's an attribution? It's a characteristic. What's the main characteristic that we're interested in besides the words in this conversation? It's our breathing. Breath trapped in the chest. It's super easy to take shit personal. Breath trapped in the chest, we get myopic. It's called amygdala hijack. Don't I sound smart? It's where we get fixated. Here's some characteristics of amygdala hijack. You get fixated, focused on the thing. Your listening ability tanks. You lose access to your creative faculties, and it's a bitch to change your mindset. It's a bitch to change your story. Good luck. We say this as coaches a lot. Good luck changing your client's mind when your breath is trapped in your chest.
Mm-hmm.
So having that definition helps quite a bit.
Substantially.
For a variety of reasons. I can go, Dave, I can go in a number of different directions, buddy.
Yeah.
Please guide me.
Well, yeah. So the thing that comes to mind is, you're talking about breath, you're talking about, story, you're talking about habitual story reproduction in your head. The thing, or the quote I always like to use is like, individuals are living in your mind rent free. They don't know that they're causing you trauma. They don't know that they're causing you to rethink things over and over again. A lot of people will just do something, and probably the guy that busted up your leg, I don't know if you had a relationship afterwards, but I'm sure he probably wasn't thinking for years after the fact that, oh man, I really messed up that guy's knee. He's probably like, oh fuck, sorry man, and then moved on. But the habitualness in my understanding, for you to habitually recreate a behavior, there has to be some sort of reward. And you mentioned that it's addictive. So what is it that contributes to somebody wanting to replay that negative story over and over again? Is it the fact that the story gives you some kind of dopamine hit? A story gives you some kind of comfort. The story gives you something that automatically defaults you to, rather than, oh, dude, why am I saying this? This is fucking stupid. Like, I can just, get over it and carry on. Like, what is it that cements itself so much that somebody will constantly say, I'm a piece of shit, I don't deserve XYZ, and then just 10 years of your life can just go by?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is failing, is a lot of times failing and then not going for the thing, or that can be, sounds strange, that can be a lot less scary than becoming the person that we know we can.
Right.
And when we got an excuse, when we've gotten out, when we've got a story that absolves us from all responsibility, okay, of the parts that we played in the story, of the wrongdoing, and I can be an exclusive victim in this and do no wrong ever at all. My fucking Lord, is that that is extremely attractive to the weaker parts or lower level parts of our psychology. And we've all got it. We've all got a spectrum of personality. Okay. There are parts of us that want the problem. They want the problem. They want the chaos. They want the drama. There are parts of us that want the success, that want the stability, that want the quality relationships. And a large part of that is because we've got a glitch in our language. And when we're not trained in how to use this thing, and when I say language, everybody, I'm talking about internal dialogue and external dialogue. This comes back to the words: what we think, what we say, what we write. Okay, our language influences us constantly, and when there's certain sentences or certain combinations of words, it forces us to create more chaos and problems, regardless of whether we want solutions. Like, that woman was tired, sick and tired of staring at this problem story.
Mm-hmm.
And who cares how tired you are of it? If you keep using the same words in the same way, you're getting that same story. So to circle back to your question, which is a fantastic question, part of it is because it's an easy out. And then it can get way even worse if you've got other people that are telling similar stories. It's the gossip table at lunch. Technically it's called trauma bonding. It's when it's drama bonding, trauma bonding. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And dude, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I totally did that. Once that thing got, the victim mentality, my flavor of it got, I would find people with scars that looked like they had had surgery from across the room and go over them and ask them about their trauma.
Really?
Ask them about,
you could be, that's like a nice thing to do if you don't have this baggage going on. Like,
bag.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks for qualifying.
I was a douchebag. All I was looking for was proof that other people didn't make it either. And I was looking.
Man,
I was look at the word
toxic.
Commiserate.
Yeah.
Super toxic. It was gross. Commiserate. Co-miserate, miserable. You're co-miserable together. And it's gossip does a great job of that. Okay. Cause you're finding someone to trash. And in that trashing, it gives us reasons why we're not at the top of our game. And or just someone who has similar problems with no solutions. Trust me, everybody, if you find yourself in a community or a friendship or a relationship and people are just talking about the problems left, right, and center and not the solutions, think about that. Get yourself out of there, because that's worse than being alone. Take it or leave it. That's just my personal opinion. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people that are telling me their story of why they can't do it, and it'll never work out for them. That is more dangerous than anything. Bombs over Baghdad, dude.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
rather
like,
have that.
it's like the the stereotype of the old man at the pub, right? They just talk about all their past failures and they just rehash the old stories of the glory days, but never having really done much. And then you can also relate that to the analogy or the research where you're a collection or a sum of the 5 closest people in your circle, and that has a massive influence on how you look at things and how you behave. Because if you're just in my context, let's say I just surround myself with grumpy veterans, and by grumpy veterans, I'm talking about the veterans that are having a hard time getting over the fact that they might have been released from the army or the military for an injury. They didn't get to do what they wanted to do. They might be a bit banged up. They're in pain. And they're like, fuck this. They're like, fucking government, fucking this. VA sucks. And I've been in those conversations, and I've recognized I've been that guy too. And when I get into those conversations with those veterans, I recognize it right away. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I can converse, but I know I won't be able to maintain contact just because I feel it within myself. Whew, there's a lot of weight here. Okay, I'm not going to try and convert you or try to convince you of anything, because typically, and this is the thing that's always interested me, is there has to be a moment like you had where you're like, I gotta change. Because I can't tell you, dude, you gotta fucking change. Maybe it works, but then again, the coolest or the best saying that I've gotten, I learned it from Jordan Peterson, but it's from the Bible.
Love
Don't cast pearls before swine. And I recognized as a teacher, this is something that I did all day. I was constantly, hey, this is how you learn this. Hey, do this. Hey, no, you got to work on this problem set. No, you got to do that. But ultimately, if a kid, and then this, let's use veterans, grown men and women in this case, they don't want your help, it's almost an impossible task to try and say, hey, I'm going to help you. This is what you need to do, until they've made that switch. But then how do you motivate somebody? Is it just intrinsic all the time? I just don't know how that happens. And that's partly why I have the podcast, to try to percolate, to drip feed just a little bit of information for somebody that might be really hardened up. Be like, hey, maybe I will try this one thing. Oh, maybe I will go out for a walk. Hey, maybe I will try and change my mindset. Maybe I will write down what Mark just said, and maybe just give it a go. Maybe I give it a go. So I'm just curious about that. Man, how do you get that person that that person? They're fucked up. They may even be your best friend. They may even be your family member.
Yeah.
What do you do to try and pull them out of that? Because you love them, right? You don't want them to suffer.
Sure.
But you also can't spend a lot of time with them because they're just going to suck the life out of you.
Sure. If someone is completely closed off to the idea of changing, a letter from Congress and a phone call from God won't work.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So if they're either there or they're over in the openness category, whether it's 1% or 81%. And here's for those people, okay? And I'm assuming the sale with your audience that they're very likely over in that category because they're listening to someone who's talking about the things that you do.
Right.
And so it's the one story challenge. What's that? Glad you asked. So we've got, we've certified 350 coaches so far in the Enlifted community. And we've got 35 veterans, first responders, partly because we've gotten in front of, we've done a couple of more than a couple, good size podcasts in the fitness industry. And also with, Mike Blood. We can talk about Mike Blood here in a second. Anyway. And so, I've heard, to the best of my ability as a civilian, I am very clear about the fact that I can, and I also listen to Sean Ryan's show.
Great show. Great new addition to my lineup,
cool.
Man. Yeah.
That dude's cool. That's a real dude.
He came out of nowhere. I'm like, wait, this guy has 1 million plus followers? Where did he come from? It's incredible. His meteoric rise. Amazing.
He's like 56 shows in.
I know.
And And so I understand that I will only be able to understand. As in, I know the difference between a civilian and then a combat vet. And having said that, I've done a damn good amount of war stories with people. Now, here's the thing. Most people, whether, and what I'm about to share with you all, it's called four-stepping stories. It is at the same time the crown jewel of the enlifted method and the Swiss Army tool of the enlifted method. It's the thing that our certification system or our coaching system, the enlifted method, is revolves around, and it's the thing that we share openly the most. Well, we're open source with our tech for a couple of reasons. One, we're teachers to the core. We want to teach people regardless of whether they walk in and pay or just we're teachers. And then we're very confident with the coaching tech. We'll put this up against whatever's out there and see who likes what, right? So there's this thing, it's called four-stepping stories, and there's four very easy steps to it. And if your listeners fall into that category, you can do it on your own. If your listeners fall into that category of either 1% open up all the way up to 99% open, I give you a challenge to four-step one of your stories. Okay. And here's how it goes. Most people keep the stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe, whatever they are, a war story, a car accident, the divorce that happened when you were 9, the dog attack, the failed business, whatever. Those stories are kept in the head. There's a very distinct difference between stories kept in the head and stories written down. And the stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe, those are the table legs that the tabletop of the victim mentality sits on. Okay. As long as those things are left to their own devices and kept in the head, it's going to influence our reticular activating system in a very specific and strong way. It's going to force us to stare at things through a negative lens.
And just to pause you, the reticular activating system, that's a system that forces our attention on something, right?
1,000%. It's the thing that once it gets programmed with something, think of it as a lens, everybody, or a filter. Once something gets programmed as important or true, it goes on a search and edit function. So have you ever, Dave, purchased a car and then you start seeing that car all over the place?
I saw Volkswagen Tiguan's for like 2 years. Like, oh, he's got one. Oh, he's got one too. Oh, he's got the same one.
They're all over the place.
They're all over the place. Yeah.
Most people have had that experience, and you know what, everybody? That's the reticular activating system. That's the reticular activating system, and our language influences the reticular activating system. They never clean up after themselves. When I say that, my reticular activating system is going to create a lens that I see all the pieces of evidence through. It's only going to allow me to see the times where they haven't cleaned up after themselves. It's going to edit out all the times they have. And now I've got just one very specific and limited data set. Or I need her to give me space. I need her to give me space. Okay, she's in the picture, I'm in the picture. It's a cramped picture, and every time I get around her, I'll feel like she's smothering me. Okay, and if I know what to do with my words, whether she is or not, okay, if I know what to do with my words, I take her out and put myself in there. No, I need to give me space. Oh wow, that's really different. That's really different. They never clean up after themselves. Well, if you learn about it's not never, it's sometimes. Sometimes. Plug that in. They sometimes don't clean up after themselves. Well, if they sometimes don't, they sometimes do. And I say that, and then I can see all the times that they have, and it's like, wow. Just like magic. When I say abracadabra, everybody, what do you immediately think of? Negation acknowledged. I wouldn't be surprised if Chase Tallison brought this up because he's got abracadabra tattooed in Aramaic on the entirety of his back.
He 100% did.
That dude's a gangster. He's a gangster with this stuff. Abracadabra is Aramaic, and it translates to with my word I create or with my word I influence. So back to the story stuff. Story kept in the head takes up a tremendous amount of mental real estate. It swirls. Where does it start? Where does it stop? There's the worst part again. Ouch. Story kept in the head, the story is still in me and I am still in the story. It is subjective. It's personal, even after all these years. Story kept in the head was a good notebook. Story kept in the head, breath trapped in the chest. Story kept in the head, breath trapped in the chest, picture in your face. Wherever you look, there it goes. Once a story is titled and written down in a certain way, everybody, as in full sentences, the devil's in the details, erring on the side of more detail than less, conversational writing, title the specific memory and write it out conversationally. Now you've externalized the story. It's now finite. There's the first word. There's the last word. Okay, and if it strongly influences you, even if it has 3 paragraphs, it's a spell by definition. A word or a combination of words of great influence. You've externalized it. The fastest way to break a spell is to write it down. The easiest way to think about your thinking, if we want to get all Alan Watts about it, and I do because I love Alan Watts, he said, when we learn to think about our thinking, we become alive in a new way. The easiest way to think about our thinking is to get the story written out and look at the words, not just believe them, look at them. Step 1, title, write it out conversationally. Step 2, read the damn thing and let yourself have the emotions. Step 3, read it again 30% slower than of your normal rate of speech. What happens when you adjust the rate of speech of the story? When you slow it down, the breath loosens up. You want that. Breath trapped in the chest,
okay.
Right. Yep. Breath trapped in the chest, it's like the thing's locked in place. And a good rule of thumb, everybody, the faster the story goes, the faster someone tells the story, the harder it is to change. A story told very quickly in a very brief way is very, very hard to change. Okay. I was in Afghanistan and my entire company got blown up. There's not enough detail there. All that stuff is just, it's still in there. I understand that the pen feels like it weighs 900 pounds, fact, or can. And let's get clear about this. That's nothing compared to bumping up into that stuff for 2, 3, 4 decades. That's the real scary shit. That's the real painful stuff. And I've done a lot of stories just like this, and I'm about to explain the 4-step here in a second, because there's only 4 with a lot of veterans. One that comes to mind, man, did I misread this guy? He came up after a workshop and said, I need to come see you. I said, cool, Thursday at 4. He came in, sat down, short, pudgy, middle age, and he goes, I just want to let you know I'm real fucked up. And I go, okay. And I was expecting him to say, I had a girlfriend in high school and she cheated on me with the quarterback, and now I just stay in the basement and watch titty flicks, Skinamax, something like that, right? And he goes, I've been in every war before they've officially started since 1980. He was the guy that trains the 2-man SEAL team reconnaissance guys, and their kill rate was it was a suicide mission, which me being a civilian, I'm very ignorant to a lot of the. And from what I understand, a suicide mission, you got a 50-50 chance of coming back. It's not a guaranteed thing. You just got a 50-50 shot. He said, I've lost everybody that I have ever cared about professionally several times over. I do not connect with anyone emotionally. I sleep 2 hours at a time throughout the night, and I wake up in cold sweats, and I'm about to put a gun in my fucking mouth. Real stuff. And you know what we did? We went in there and got the worst stories he had, which were kept in his head, and got them down on paper, which makes your life, if you were a coach, if you're a counselor, if you were a therapist, get it in writing. It's so much easier to work through a story once it's in writing, once it's on paper, because now you and your client are looking at the same configuration of words. It's extremely clarifying. And then when you know what to do with the breath, because like I said, it's about the breath. The breath is a lever, and it's majorly underutilized when it comes to helping people come out of upregulated stress states, also known as PTSD, also known as, if we keep going back, it's shell shock. It's all the same stuff. Yeah. It's these stories get in there, breath gets trapped in the chest, and this feedback loop kicks off, and it's like you just redline until something blows, right? And another one comes to mind. This guy was a British Royal Marine. The guy next to him stepped on a mine, blew him in half, and they pulled back, and then they took the legs of his friend and hung them up on a post out in the middle of a field, trying to get people to come out there and expose them to fire. Mm-hmm. Dude, first responders, microwaved babies, like, and then guess what? It also, like I said, the story of when your parents sat you down and told you they were getting a divorce when you were 9, and your sister's under the table crying, and you're thinking, well, I got to be the man of the family now, and because dad's leaving and I'm with mom and she's a mess, and I gotta be responsible for her emotions and feelings. And then you take that pattern into your adult relationships and wonder why you feel like you got to keep showing up for everybody all the time. It's the same stuff. These stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe, the 4-step method, it doesn't care what the context is. I'm speaking in a certain way to your audience because I know y'all are veterans. P.S. Thanks for your service. I'm not one of those fools that thinks we need to defund stuff to make things better. That's genius. That's great. Wonderful idea. No, at the very top of that shit's a psyop. Anyway, and so, right, that 4th step, this is super. Let's review. Get it in writing. Title it, write it out conversationally. Step 1. Step 2, read it. Allow yourself to have any feels. There's likely going to be some. Step 3, read it. It's 30% slower of your normal rate of speech. Your breath is going to unlock. It's going to loosen up. And then that 4th step is where at the end of each sentence, you pause and do this. Go to the next sentence. And what happens, mechanically speaking, when the breath descends, the picture moves out. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you go from the participant to the observer. And let me say this, because I know I go on rants and tangents like a motherfucker. Before I ask you what's the best place here, please know who you're listening to, everybody. Okay, I am a former elementary school PE teacher. I have a handful of MMA fights. I've got an IQ of 12. Okay, this is not medical advice.
On a good day.
On a good day. Okay, and so this is a tool that you might get an experience from using, this. Having said that, I didn't need a doctorate to create the story when I was 9 when my parents divorced. I didn't need a doctorate to create the stories of me being bullied when I was in high school. I didn't need a doctorate to create the story of why my life is now almost not worth living when I jacked my knee up in Thailand. I didn't need a doctorate to create those stories, and I don't need a doctorate to change them. I don't need a doctorate. I do not need a PhD to pick up a pen and write that shit down and read it and see what happens to my feels, and then read it slow and start playing with the levers, the pads, the accelerator, the brake of my story. I don't need a PhD to get the breath in between my sentences. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah, I love that, man. That's precisely the same conversation I had with Dr. Kelly Starrett when it comes to maintaining your soft tissue in your body.
Supple leopard, yeah. Supple gangster.
He's on a mission to make sure that you can take care of yourself. It's only recently that we abdicate everything to a doctor with a PhD. And I love what you just said there. All these things happen without having a PhD. You didn't have to have a PhD to create a story that is inflicting chaos internally. And you definitely don't need one to help start fixing it. And I love that 4-step process. I did it actually with Jared when I started with Strong Coach. Yeah. It was really powerful, man, because I never really did that before. I've done other stuff, and I've done stuff professionally with professional therapists. I've done stuff with other coaches that, in my opinion, I get much more from coaches that don't have PhDs than from the actual professionals, because I feel like what I do with the professionals is very cold and very professional and not getting deep into who I am. Whereas a coach, the goal of the coach is to coach you along and to see you succeed. And it's not just an appointment on their agenda, at least the good ones anyways. And that's where I feel guys like yourself and your organization helping other coaches help other people. That's where we're going to figure out these things, because I don't, like you said earlier, touch base on, being in education your whole life. I never learned anything about this. And this is education. If I don't know what is education, if not this, learning about yourself, learning how to manage yourself, learning how to manage your emotions, your story. How is this not part of what we do from day one? And it seems like, oh, the parents will sort it out. I don't know how. We've lost it over how many generations? How many generations ago did we start losing this ability to connect and tell our story? My dad doesn't know how to do it. My mom doesn't know how to do it. My grandparents definitely didn't know how to do it. So where did that go? And it's like guys like yourself, the organization, are starting to bring that back to the tactical level, if you want to call it. Dude, you got to breathe. And so I guess my next question on the breath, it just brought up at a basic question. If you can unlock your breath, let's say you're having a hard time with the writing. Let's say I'm just can't get it, man. Like I'm not consistent with it. Nothing's flowing. If you start working on your breath and doing some breath work, could that potentially act as kind of like a flank to start opening that up so that, maybe then something would flow? Or does it have to be kind of all in one process, the writing, the breath work, and slowing down?
1,000% either one.
Okay, cool.
Our stories influence our breathing. Our breathing influence our stories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when someone is breathing diaphragmatically, when someone is in parasympathetic nervous system response, we keep it extremely simple in lift. When someone is breathing low and slow, okay, they're going to have a longer fuse. They're going to have a different perspective on things. Okay, they're going get a load of this. They're going to be a way better listener. They're going to be a way better listener. Which, on that same note, here's another saying for y'all, everybody. Good breathing equals good coaching, because good breathing equals good listening, and good listening equals good coaching. So good breathing equals good coaching. And I'm very happy to ask Brandon Powell if he would be a guest on your show, if you would like to have him. He's the Enlifted Breathwork coach. He's a second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and one of only a handful of Wim Hof level 3 instructors in North America. Oh yeah, he's the guy. He brings the pizzazz, the jazz, the music. When they were doing certifications, I don't know if they are now, not as much as they were. He was one of the 3 instructors for North America. I went to middle school with the guy. I was in a special ed class with him for the entire 6th grade year. It's like it's funny, right? And so we've done at least we both talked about it, and we picked the most lowest number that we'll both agree upon. It's very likely more. We've done at least 15 workshops together, where mostly CrossFit gyms, where I will start with the story stuff. Okay, we'll get people writing stories down, going through them just like I shared with you, changing some words out, thinking about our thinking. And then he follows up with a breath. He's also a DJ and a vocalist, and he mixes music in with his sessions. And do that. The combination is beautiful. And I've seen a lot of people. I've gone to his events where there was no writing and exploration of the story, and people get in there and they do a breathwork session, and all kinds of junk comes up and out, and they feel like $1 million afterwards. Because you talked about, when did this thing get lost? What is this thing that we're talking about? Well, one of the things that we're talking about is the ability to get stress out of our system.
Yeah.
And most people have seen a little lap dog with 3 hairs and a snaggletooth going in that direction, and it sits there and shakes even though it's the summertime, and it's warm, it's still shaking. It's not cold. That thing's not cold. You know what it is? It's domesticated. 2,000 years ago, that thing was a wolf. And when an animal, and we're animals, when an animal goes through domestication, it loses its innate unconscious mechanism to get stress out of the system. Go to YouTube, everybody, and plug in trauma bear. It's this video of a polar bear getting tranquilized, chased by a helicopter, tranquilized, and before the stuff was wearing complete, it was still under the anesthetic or whatever it's called. It starts shaking, and then eventually the breath and gets down into its abdomen, and you see the stress coming out of this thing, because animals are smart. They know that I got to get this shock out of my system. Bad things happen when shock stays in an animal's system. And we have the added blessing and curse of story and words.
Right.
Okay. And it can be a blessing, as in let's get these stories out and aired out, and we going in, not as scary as not going in there. And then we also, it can be a curse of like when we just keep it all inside. That's what makes people blow up.
Yeah.
Whether it's a stroke or an addiction or something worse. And you know, man, I saw a buddy of mine come back from the first Iraq war. He was a 50 cal gunner on an Amtrak. He was a Marine. He stormed Nasiriyah, and that dude hadn't been the same since. Okay, and it's me, right? I knew him way before that. It's me, so it's like it's hard to be you can't be a coach to your family and your friends in that way. It's like, so, and he knows very well what I do and all that stuff. And I've watched him get mediocre, churn 'em and burn 'em counseling from the VA and a handful of benzos. And it just it's just gone in not a good direction, man. And I appreciate the people that are brave enough to pick up some arms. I appreciate the first responders. I appreciate our police. I appreciate our firefighters. I'm calling it, man. I bet money I go on the Sean Ryan show. We got one of our coaches that Sean used to work for. Sean used to work for that dude in one of the 3-letter agencies. And this guy's in our level 2 certification. He goes, I could reach out to him. I was like, okay, let's, he and I are going to meet in person, because all our stuff's virtual. And I'm going to keep talking to the veteran and first responders community because I want to.
Yeah. Things need to change. Like, things desperately need to change. Like, if you
suicide rates, that bothers me. That fucking bothers me.
That's exactly where I was going with this. The whole concept of the system is supposed to, have a standard of care, and you're supposed to improve things. And if things don't get better and they keep on getting worse, and you keep on seeing this rapid uptick in suicides and mental health crises, clearly something's not going right. Well, what is it? And I mean, I've got a whole laundry list of things that are going wrong. And don't get me wrong, there are services and the bureaucracy is trying, but ultimately, it's, in my opinion, there is, if you want to look at from a macro perspective, society is sick. You're talking about domestication. You're talking about just living here, even though, and we get this message yeah, but where else would you want to live? You're right. It's great here, but it could be substantially better. And we're doing something critically wrong, which is, in my opinion, not allowing for the warrior ethos that we all have to kind of be explored. And then also, we're so isolated. Get people together, get the veterans hanging out together, doing their thing, chatting, shoulder to shoulder, just being men again, doing hard shit. Don't give us drugs. Don't in a stabilization phase. I had a great conversation with a psychiatrist here about men's health and veterans' mental health. And he's like, we're just doing it wrong. Men can't get better by sitting on a Zoom call with their therapist. They typically won't get better one-on-one, face-to-face with somebody. They'll get better if they're amongst other men doing hard stuff, maybe in the woods. Doesn't matter. Just do hard stuff together, and you'll create that bond, and that's what's causing the neuroses and the inability to kind of get back to normal and get rid of that stress. And there's a whole wealth of different things that we can be doing. But I totally agree, man. Like, we even just came up, me and my buddy, business partner, a veteran buddy of mine, with an idea to build a game based on a smartwatch to get veterans active and literally moving, because that is such a big component to not being well, is just not moving. You're sitting inside, no vitamin D, no muscle mass, you're obese. Like, dude, these are all things that contribute. Yeah, exactly. And then you're not breathing properly. You're telling stories in your head all day. At least if you go out and do some PT, some activity, that's a moment in time where if you're doing something hard enough, you're not thinking about your story. I'm not, at least when I'm grabbing a barbell. I'm not thinking about that. When I'm trying not to get my head taken off by playing this, not hurling, this Irish sport that I do, I'm really not thinking about, man, Afghanistan sucked. I can't. I'm thinking about not dying. Jiu-jitsu, same thing.
Oh yeah.
You're going to try to take my head off? I'm not like, oh man, I could have done more when I was, it's gone. So the stress is able to come down a little bit. So that's what I love about your message, man. And that's exactly, I think, where we need to focus a lot of our efforts is the individuals that, they're in the system, but they need to get a message that's not governmental, that's not from the doctor, that's not, hey, there's different ways of doing
grassroots.
Things. There you go. And you know what? I saw this again. I was in Las Vegas last year. I've said it, I think, a million times in my podcast, but it left such an impression on me with the veteran community at the Veteran Influencer Conference in Vegas last year. The conversation was, I had like 5 or 6 conversations about magic mushrooms and psilocybin and going on a healing journey. And I just had my buddy on who created this new program for veterans, international, to go and do ayahuasca ceremonies. And the reason why I bring that up is because I never thought that our community, which is typically a little bit more conservative, would be at the leading edge of more like esoteric and more we would call hippie like things. Yep. To help heal ourselves, because we're at a point where it's like we can't keep this shit isn't working, guys. This shit isn't working. I want to get better. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better dad. We all want to be better. We all want to be able to be active in our communities and kick ass and take names in a different way. But we can't if we're stuck in our basements and we're just telling ourselves shitty stories. So that's why I'm really impressed with what you're doing.
It's an ancient archetype, the warrior mystic. That appeals to a large swath of a man's psyche, a warrior mystic. And community, dude, community. All kinds of weird shit happens when people don't have a community. They're not part of a community. And a community can fix a whole bunch of weird shit. Okay? An article came out in the New York Times, of all places, this past weekend. They asked, what would you bet on? A therapist or a gym membership?
As having the best, like, better mental health outcomes? Gym membership, yes, 100%. I've seen this. I've seen the research. It's a no-brainer. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. Absolutely, get people moving. Get people doing stuff together. And it's you don't have to be in a community all day long, every day, all week, month. Dude, a little bit of that goes so far. And shout out to CrossFit. If it's okay, I'll add the story of CrossFit and Mike Bledsoe and sure, why we reached out in 2016. So 2014, I did some CrossFit classes. And then I did some more in 2015, and I went to my business partner. We had just incorporated, and I said, "Hey, man, these CrossFit people, they're different. They're adventurous, as in you got to learn a bunch of crazy stuff. Crazy wild shit. Yeah.
PE, right? You didn't learn that in PE in high school. No. They have work ethics. They have goals." And they're pack animals, so they're there. It's a team thing. I was like, dude, if we can get this thing in front of them, I bet it catches. And 2016, October 2016, after 10 years of working in a variety of different, 2 things got me to make this ask. 10 years working in and out of a variety of yoga circles and scenes, and very easy. Get the story out of your head and on paper, Let's put it through this thing. Let's change some words, and the breath unlocks. You think yogis like that? They really like that. And so I had 10 years of experience of helping people improve their breathing that were already in the breathing game. Okay. The looks on their faces was quite revelatory. Because people overlook this, man. This is the easiest thing in the world to overlook, is the story. It's right between our ears, right under our nose, and right at our fingertips. It's the easiest thing to discount and overlook. And so 2016 October, we're on that island of Koh Samui again, and my business partner sends me a text. We have $1,000 in the bank.
Mm.
We just made payroll. We got $1,000 left, and I knew, generally speaking, where we were. I didn't know it was that, and so I got up and I drank a cup of coffee, and I messaged 5 people in the CrossFit space: 2 competitors, 3 box owners. Who's got the best podcast in CrossFit? And they all came back and said Barbell Shrugged. And
Right.
I made that request because I knew that I have something to say. We have something to say to the fitness industry about how their words are influencing their breathing for better and for worse. How their stories are influencing their breathing for better and for worse. How their stories and their breathing are influencing their mindset for better and for worse. And they all came back and said Barbell Shrugged, and one person circled back. He was one of the competitors, regional guy. And he said, "Oh, by the way, Mike Bledsoe is aware of your work. Would you like an introduction?" I said, "Well, no shit." I said, "Damn right, I'd like an introduction." And 2 emails later, we're on the calendar. And you can file this under showing up, everybody. I flew from Thailand to Los Angeles to do that podcast in person. And when that thing dropped, dude, we got introduced to the fitness industry through the best mouthpiece in CrossFit.
Yeah.
And things have been different since. Things have been very different, and will always be different since. That was a before and after moment. And Mike and I, we became buddies, man. And he is a forever vital piece of the origin story of this thing that's working.
No doubt, man. And that was, it's funny you talk about Mike, right? Like that's one of the reasons why I gravitated towards a strong coach. So I was listening to his podcast years ago, right? I was like, oh wait. And like now I'm on calls with it's weird how you perceive people, right? Because when you see them on a show, when I oddly get this every now and then where somebody is chatting with me on DM. Is this actually you? Yeah. Oh, no way. I didn't think I'd be talking to you. Who do you think you'd be talking to? Because they're like, well, I listened to all your shows. And so you get this perception that the individual has, some kind of status, which would preclude him from talking to you. Right. And so I had that with Mike. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking to you. He's like, yep, that's it's me. And, we've been working together now for the last 8 months, I think. It's been really cool because I love that he's got this take on, I would call it deep health. I think is the best way to talk about it. And he's open to new ideas. And that was kind of the biggest drawing point, was that just being open to new ideas, and, you don't necessarily have to incorporate them, but just be open. And I think that's the most important thing, is the critical thinking and being open to new ideas is going to be the most important skill sets that you have moving forward, or personality traits moving forward in this crazy world that we're living in right now. We need more critical thinkers. We need more people that are open to experience and are open to just, you know what, maybe I can let that in a little bit. Maybe I can talk about breath work. Maybe I can talk about doing some coaching work and using the 4 steps to my story. Maybe this would be a little bit better off than what I'm doing right now. And seeing the positive changes move forward. So, Mark, I wanted to just wrap things up with just, where do you see this going in the future? And by this, I mean, the way that you're coaching, you're influencing a lot of people. Do you see this as a critical component to the general well-being of, Western society? Or do you see it as part of just this part of coaching, where coaching, in your opinion, acts as this conduit to good ideas for a healthier, fitter, you want to call it America, Western world, however you see it? Like, where do you see this going in the future? Because we got some interesting things happening with AI, with, just the collapse of kind of a lot of our institutions. Where do you see yourself fitting in this new crazy wild world?
We're going to see a bifurcation. we're going to see a bifurcation of people. Because some people want to get better, and there are going to be people that are going to help them get better. Okay, they're invested in people getting better. And there are some people that want to get bitter. And there are people that are going to help them get better. There are institutions that are there to inflame. It's very fucking sneaky. And if we go far enough, evil. There are conversations that are weaponized in order to further entrench and inflame people's victim mentalities and drive them nuts, and then use them as a control mechanism. Okay, there are institutions that are there to capitalize off the victim mentality, and then there are groups of people that are there to dismantle the victim mentality. And if you want to get all fucking weird about it, let's get all weird about it. We're either it's either the Borg or Star Trek. Nice. Humanity plus technology plus the victim mentality equals the Borg.
Resistance is futile.
Don't look fun. Resistance is futile. Nobody's got a tan. People are all, it's this merger of man and machine from a top-down, single-point, omnipotent, technocratic overlord. The soul has been extracted out of humanity. People are not reproducing anymore. Okay, their babies are being grown in. You think this is no? Look up. Just look this shit up. Look up transhumanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been down that rabbit hole a few times, my friend.
Oh yeah. And or humanity plus technology plus a hero's mentality, an architect mentality equals Star Trek. Because unless we get hit by a comet, technology is here to stay.
Yeah, and
it's going to empower whatever story people have. It's going to make it increase. And if someone is stuck in that victim story, it's and especially if you're hanging around with other people, and because there are some people that are playing the victim Olympics. Everybody, it's like, who's got the worst story?
I use that term all the time.
They're winning.
No need to play the victim Olympics. All right, we've all had our shit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody wins in this Olympics, though.
No, exactly. And look at what we were talking about earlier. This losing our innate ability to kick out stress out of the system. What the fuck is a microaggression? I mean, that's only making that thing worse. Because if all these different levels of aggression, and it's just this you call me the wrong thing, and I freak out. Have a turn yourself into a grown ass man, baby. And like I said, some people are their stories are getting worse.
Yeah.
And I know the game you play, buddy. You're in the let's get this story working better for us game. We play the same game. It's the same team. Let's unlock people's breathing and see what happens. Okay, because people are, when someone's breathing well, they're a whole lot less easy to control. When someone is stuck in the victim mentality and their breath is trapped in their chest and they're pissed off, scared, combination of both, they're super easy to control. That's the easiest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that won't end well.
Yeah, I like how you see things. There's that bifurcation. You said there's going to be the people that are really going to take it and they're going to embody it, and then they're going to help others, and then there's the bitterness. That's always going to be there. But which side is going to have the upper hand? I think right now, I think you're right. It's hard to tell. I'm an eternal optimist. At some point, the forces of good and being virtuous will prevail. But at what point? Because it's very troubling now to see a lot of people that are in a lot of distress and having nowhere to turn, and the forces of evil can definitely get a hold of you at that point. So I love your message. I love the fact that you're on the You're on the good guys team.
I'm on the Unlock Your Breath team. I'm on the Think for Yourself team.
Yeah.
And just so it's said, regardless of what happens, I'm playing on this team.
Yeah.
One of our coaches asked me in May 2020, lockdown, when all that thing was kicking off, they go, "What are you going to do?" And I go, "I don't care if a thermonuclear warhead is about to land on my face. I'm going to work. I'm sending the emails. I'm going on shows. I'm teaching classes." And that right there gives me existential comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a gangster way to be, and I like it.
That is, man. It's a very stoic way to be. I love it. And if somebody wants to learn more about your organization, about you, about your TED Talk, we didn't even get into, where can people go find everything about Mark?
Enlifted.me. It's all about our certifications. At Enlifted Coaches on Instagram. We have a podcast, Getting Lifted. It's about words, stories, breath. And that TED Talk, YouTube, Mark England, TED Talk. It's a good one.
It is a good one. I really enjoyed it. So Mark, this has been a hoot. I think I'm going to have to split this up into 2 episodes so people can digest, go back, write down some stuff, come back, see some progress, and allow them to be able to absorb this a little bit better, because this was a badass conversation, and obviously we can go on and on and on. And that's the point. So it is an absolute honor having you on, man. This has been, I think, the start of something really cool, and I definitely want to touch base with you down the road too, and keep me updated as to how things are going with your Enlifted organization. So Mark, thanks so much, man. I'm going to go pick up my car and my children and finish off the day that way. And I hope you have a really good day. And folks, thanks for listening. As always, train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace. I hate t-shirts that get floppy in the arms after 10 washes. So that's why I created a bunch of t-shirts with high quality cotton just for you, so that you can go to the gym and look fresh, sport some philosophy, and smash those PRs looking good. So you need to head to davemorrow.net/merch, grab yourself a hat, grab yourself a t-shirt, grab yourself a sweater, and support the cause today.